Without memory, a millionaire heiress awakens in a hospital and is taken in by a mysterious man, but the truth is terrifying. Clara slowly opened her eyes, as if the simple act of waking was a monumental effort. Her eyelids felt heavy, and a sharp pain pulsed in her head, radiating through every confused and disoriented thought. Above her was a cold, white light, a reflection that blurred and reformed, as though she were submerged in water, at a depth where nothing was truly clear. The sterile smell of the place brought a moment of lucidity, and she knew, like a flash of memory that didn't belong to her, that she was in a hospital. There was a deep emptiness in her mind, as if she were lost within herself. She couldn't remember where she had come from, what she had done, or how she had ended up there. She tried to move, but her body felt weak, held down by an invisible weight that kept her pressed to the mattress. It was then that she noticed a presence beside her bed. A man. He was there, silent, sitting in a metal chair, watching her. His face was a mixture of relief and unsettling seriousness. His eyes reflected a mix of worry and something she couldn't identify. Clara? He said softly, almost whispering. She frowned, as if the sound of her own name didn't exactly belong to her. The echo of those words felt strange and out of place, almost as if he were calling someone else. Who are you? Her voice came out trembling, uncertain, a wave of confusion overwhelming her body. He smiled, a reassuring smile, but there was something in his eyes that didn't match that gesture. It was as if the expression were rehearsed, something meant to comfort her but that only made her more alert, even though her body felt immobilized. It's me, Gabriel, your fiancé. Those words felt as distant as the reality around her. Fiancé. The word echoed in Clara's mind, making no sense at all. How could he be her fiancé if she couldn't even remember who she was? Her heart began to beat faster, and she realized she couldn't remember anything at all. Not her own face, much less that of the man sitting beside her. She tried to mumble a response, but he leaned closer, gently holding her hand. There was something in his touch that made her shiver, as if she were clinging to an anchor amid the whirlwind that was her empty mind. Gabriel seemed to notice her hesitation. It's all right, you had an accident, he explained, his voice now low and soothing, as if he were trying to calm her. The doctors said it might cause a temporary memory block, but it will pass, Clara. It will pass. She tried to absorb those words, but felt a void in her chest, a feeling of loss so profound it almost made her want to cry. There was a strange sensation that this man, Gabriel, was a stranger surrounding her with comforting words, but that, somehow, they didn't feel like they were truly hers. No memories returned. There wasn't a single fragment of her life before that moment. Her chest tightened, a wave of panic rising within her. But as she struggled to understand the situation, Gabriel kept speaking, filling the void with a careful calm. I know it's hard, my love. I know it seems confusing now, but I'm here. I won't leave you alone. There was tenderness in his words, but also a subtle urgency. Clara looked at him, trying to grasp something in his face that made sense, that reminded her of something, but all she saw was a stranger trying to be too close, too quickly. Gabriel seemed to study every expression she made, as if he were carefully watching for any reaction. She noticed that his gaze was both intense and restrained, as if he were hiding something behind each word. The idea of being Clara, someone who apparently had a story, a life, but no access to it, was overwhelming. Clara could have been anyone. And she didn't know if this man, Gabriel, could be the secure anchor he tried to appear to be, or if he was just another mysterious element in this scenario where nothing made sense. She shifted her gaze to the ceiling, trying to stay calm, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was trapped somehow. She focused on her breathing, trying to calm her racing heart, but her mind was a storm of unanswered questions. Who was he really? And more importantly, who was she? After a few moments, a nurse entered the room, breaking the tension between her and Gabriel. She was a middle-aged woman with a soft, gentle smile. She looked at Clara, and for a brief moment, There was a glimmer in her eyes, as if she were trying to read the frightened expression on her face. "Good morning, Clara. How are you feeling?" the nurse asked as she adjusted some monitors by the bed. Clara hesitated before answering, her gaze shifting toward Gabriel, who watched the exchange closely. She felt a tightness in her chest. There was something familiar in that setting, but she couldn't understand why. "I think, confused," she finally replied. Her voice was hoarse, as if it had been forgotten for a long time. "That's normal, dear," the nurse replied, trying to comfort her. "The accident was serious, and the doctors said you might need some time to adjust." She tried to nod, but the pain in her neck stopped her. The nurse cast a quick glance at Gabriel, and for an instant, Clara noticed they exchanged a brief, indecipherable look, as if they shared something she didn't know about. As the nurse left the room, she gave Clara one last look, a look that seemed to hold a silent message, but before Clara could interpret it, she was alone with Gabriel once more. Gabriel reached for her face, brushing a strand of hair away and leaving his hand there, like a caring gesture that Clara didn't know if she should reciprocate. He looked at her intensely, as if he were waiting for a reaction, a smile, any sign that confirmed his story. "We'll go home soon, my love," he said, his voice softer, almost a whisper. "Soon all this will just be a bad memory." But as he spoke, Clara felt that, deep down, this was only the beginning of something larger and more confusing. Something that might involve much more than just a lost memory in a hospital. When she was discharged, Clara still felt weak, and Gabriel insisted on supporting her every step of the way. The small town of Velmer, with its narrow streets lined with old buildings, seemed to offer a warmth she didn't feel within herself. Yet, a sense of strangeness surrounded her, a discomfort she couldn't explain, as if she were moving through scenes from a life that wasn't truly hers. Gabriel's car was parked outside, and he guided her to the passenger seat with exaggerated care, making sure she was comfortable and secure. During the drive, he spoke about the quiet life they had in the town, describing places as if hoping she would remember something. He mentioned their apartment on the top floor of an old, well-located building, from which they could see the center of Velmer and its main landmarks. As Gabriel guided the car through tree-lined streets, Clara tried to absorb his words, but everything felt so empty. There was an odd familiarity to the landscapes passing by the window, the shops, the small cafes, the squares, as if she had been there before, but somehow was unable to connect with any memory. "This is our home, Clara," he said as he parked in front of a small, old building with a light facade and large windows. The building had a cozy feel, and Gabriel guided her through the entrance hall, still holding her arm. He opened the apartment door and helped her inside. The space was bright and simple but decorated with charming touches, neutral-toned armchairs, bookshelves filled with books, and landscape paintings. Fresh flowers sat on the table, giving off a sweet scent, and Gabriel let a proud smile slip, as if wanting her to be impressed with the place. "You've always loved flowers, so I made sure to fill the apartment with them, just for your return," he explained, with a smile that tried to be reassuring. Clara looked around, trying to feel some sense of familiarity, any spark that might connect her to a memory, but everything seemed empty. The flowers, the colors, and the furniture said nothing to her. She moved toward the window, gazing at the streets of Velmer below. The breeze that came through the open window carried a fresh scent, and she closed her eyes, trying to grasp any lost sensation. "Don't worry, Clara. I know it's a lot to take in all at once," Gabriel said, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, as if observing her with a mix of patience and expectation. She wanted to believe his words. He seemed so attentive, so devoted, yet at the same time, something inside her warned not to trust him completely. The memories didn't return, and every time Gabriel called her "my love," she felt a growing discomfort. He seemed so eager to convince her of who she was that it began to feel rehearsed, like an actor reciting well-memorized lines. Even so, Clara decided it was pointless to challenge him, at least not for now. Her mind was too exhausted and fragmented to sustain any confrontation. She made her way to the couch, where Gabriel had arranged some cushions, apparently to make the place feel even cozier. She sat down slowly, allowing herself a moment of rest. "Make yourself at home. I'll prepare something for you to eat," he said, walking toward the kitchen. While Gabriel busied himself with pots and pans, Clara looked around, examining the details. She noticed small decorative objects on the shelves and saw a picture frame next to some books. There were 2 photos side by side. One showed Gabriel in a confident, smiling pose. The other, a woman she barely recognized. It was her own face, but the image seemed blurred in her mind, as if it belonged to a stranger. She got up and moved toward the photo, studying the image more closely. She tried to search for any fragment of memory, any spark that connected that woman to her identity. In the background, the sounds of Gabriel preparing the meal made the silence heavy. "I took that photo on our beach trip, remember?" Gabriel's voice brought her back, breaking her concentration. He was holding a tray with a bowl of soup and a glass of water, smiling. "You always loved taking pictures, capturing moments. And this was a special trip for us." She felt a wave of discomfort. The word special echoed in her mind, but without meaning. There was no memory of that trip, of that photo. Only the weight of an expectation. He wanted her to remember, but the truth was, nothing felt real to her. Sitting back down, she accepted the soup he had prepared, but the taste, though comforting, didn't evoke any memory or sense of familiarity. Gabriel sat beside her, his eyes fixed on her, with an attention that bordered on anxiousness. He seemed so focused on her every movement that Clara felt an invisible weight of responsibility on her. "I don't want to force anything, Clara," he said in a careful tone. "I just want you to feel safe. I know it's a difficult process, and I'm willing to be here every moment, until you remember everything." She nodded, forcing a smile. Deep down, she knew he expected a response, perhaps a reaction of trust, but all she felt was a growing need for answers. When Gabriel stepped away to organize the kitchen, she took the opportunity to explore the apartment a little more. She went to the bedroom, where she found a neatly made double bed with white sheets and a small bedside lamp. There were women's clothes in the closet, arranged as if they belonged to her, but nothing there felt familiar. A sense of disconnect and emptiness flooded her chest. It was like being in a life that wasn't hers, with someone who seemed to know far more about her than she knew about herself. Clara turned to the mirror in the corner of the room, looking at herself with a sense of strangeness. Every detail of her face seemed familiar, yet distant, like an image she had only just come to know. She touched her own face, trying to see if contact would trigger any memory, but nothing happened. All she felt was an absence, a lack of meaning. Returning to the living room, Gabriel was seated, his expression calm, like someone willing to wait as long as necessary. "Is there anything I can help with?" he asked, noticing her vacant gaze. "I'm just trying to orient myself," she replied, hesitantly. She felt a pressure to trust him, to align herself with what he said she was. But his words didn't seem to connect with any feeling. He stood up and approached her, placing his hand on her shoulder in a light touch, which made her shiver. "It's going to be okay, Clara. You'll see, it's only a matter of time." She wished he were right, that everything could make sense at some point. But something deep in her mind seemed to warn her that this man and this place held more secrets than he let on. And while he tried to lead her into a life she didn't remember, the only certainty she had was that she should keep her eyes open, never fully surrendering to the story he was telling her. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the apartment window, enveloping the room in a soft, golden light. Gabriel was preparing breakfast, while Clara, seated at the table, observed every detail of the kitchen, searching for something that might make sense, an object that might evoke a memory. But the space around her felt almost cold, like a set stage to deceive her senses. "I thought a walk around the neighborhood might help," Gabriel suggested, serving coffee in porcelain cups. Maybe seeing some familiar places will bring back memories? Clara nodded, accepting the suggestion. Part of her longed to leave that apartment, to escape that controlled atmosphere. Perhaps the streets of Velmer could provide answers, filling in the gaps of an identity she was still struggling to decipher. She put on a coat and followed Gabriel into the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoing as they descended the building's narrow staircase. Outside, the fresh air hit her like a refreshing wake-up call. Velmer seemed like a town with a personality of its own, with its charming old buildings lined by trees that danced to the rhythm of a light breeze. The locals moved along the sidewalks, greeting one another with familiarity, as if everyone knew exactly who the others were. Clara observed their expressions and gestures, but none of them seemed truly familiar to her. Gabriel guided her down the main street, pointing out shops and cafes that, according to him, held special meaning for them. He mentioned a small corner bookstore where she loved to spend hours reading and a cozy cafe where they used to meet. Yet, looking at these places, she felt an emptiness, as if she were merely passing through a reality that didn't truly belong to her. As they walked, something caught her attention. A newsstand displayed old editions, some yellowed with age. She approached it instinctively, drawn by an inexplicable feeling. There was something about those newspapers that seemed to call out for her attention. She scanned the headlines quickly, letting her eyes skim the covers until one finally jumped out at her. Pereira family, a fortune wrapped in mystery. The image showed an imposing mansion and a group of serious-looking people who seemed to belong to a life she had never known. Curiosity made her pick up the newspaper, but Gabriel quickly grabbed her arm. "That's not going to help you, Clara," he said with a forced smile. "Those papers only bring tragedy and gossip. Let's keep moving." She hesitated for a moment, feeling an inexplicable attraction to that headline. But noticing Gabriel's insistent gaze, she decided to follow him, though an unease began to grow inside her. It felt as if he wanted to keep her away from certain information, from certain details that might lend meaning to her fragmented memories. As they continued to walk, he led her to a park where children played and birds chirped happily. The scene was peaceful, almost idyllic, and Gabriel smiled with satisfaction as he watched her expression. He pointed to a wooden bench under a tree and said that it was where they often sat to talk about the future. "You always dreamed of a simple life," he said, almost as a reminder. "Quiet, away from complications. That's what you liked." Clara nodded, but deep inside, something told her that this idea of a simple life wasn't really part of who she was. It was as if she were hearing the description of a story that didn't belong to her. Her emotions didn't match what he described. There was an emptiness inside her that didn't seem to be filled by his words. While Gabriel continued talking, she glanced around the park and noticed an elderly woman sitting on one of the benches. The woman looked at her, and for a moment, their eyes met. There was something in the woman's gaze that made Clara shiver, a silent, almost enigmatic recognition. The woman seemed as if she wanted to say something, but then quickly looked away, as though she'd been caught in a forbidden act. "Who is that lady?" Clara asked instinctively, not realizing she'd spoken out loud. Gabriel followed her gaze and saw the woman, but his expression hardened slightly. "She's just an old resident, probably curious to see new faces around here," he replied, deflecting. The vague response didn't convince her, but she decided not to press him. They continued their walk, and Gabriel suggested they stop at a small cafe next to a bookstore. The place was cozy, with rustic decor and walls lined with shelves full of books. Gabriel ordered coffee and cake for both of them, saying it was her favorite treat. Clara tasted the cake, but again, the sense of familiarity he was trying to evoke simply wasn't there. It felt as though he were always trying to use small details to guide her, shaping her into a life he claimed was hers. No matter how much he insisted on memories and feelings she supposedly held, nothing fit. While they were there, the elderly woman she'd seen at the park passed by the cafe and cast an attentive look her way, almost as if she were studying her. This time, Clara decided to act. She stood up quickly and approached the woman, while Gabriel watched closely, clearly displeased. "Excuse me, have we met before?" Clara asked cautiously. The woman looked her up and down, with a compassionate and curious gaze. "My dear, you remind me of someone. But maybe I'm mistaken," the lady replied with an enigmatic smile. In a small town like this, everyone ends up resembling each other in some way. Before Clara could ask anything else, the woman walked away, leaving her with an even stronger sense that she was close to something important. She returned to her seat, feeling Gabriel's watchful gaze upon her, heavy and inquisitive. He seemed slightly uncomfortable but maintained a controlled smile. "It seems you still attract a lot of attention, even without remembering it," he said jokingly, though with a hint of tension. Clara laughed lightly, but inside, her mind was racing. That woman, that brief encounter, everything seemed to carry a hidden message. There was something in that neighborhood, in that walk, that awakened her doubts and instincts that something was wrong. After a few more minutes at the cafe, Gabriel suggested they return to the apartment. On the way back, while he casually talked about how they would spend the afternoon, she remained lost in thought, trying to piece together the invisible puzzle. The town, the people, Gabriel's efforts to guide her in every detail, it all began to feel like a carefully staged production. Crossing the threshold of the apartment, she felt the weight of the place, the same sensation of stepping into a story that wasn't hers. Gabriel watched as she took off her coat, his gaze a mixture of expectation and vigilance, as if he were trying to gauge her every reaction. Clara took a deep breath. She felt she needed to keep her doubts to herself, at least until she understood more about what was happening. But deep down, something told her that her life in Velmer was just beginning, and that walk around the neighborhood had been more revealing than anything Gabriel could have told her. When Gabriel left for a meeting in the middle of the afternoon, Clara finally found herself alone in the apartment. His presence seemed to linger everywhere, filling each space with an invisible surveillance. She took a deep breath, savoring that moment of freedom, and began to explore the place with a more attentive, meticulous eye. As she walked through the living room, she observed every detail with the eyes of a detective, looking for anything that might confirm her suspicions. There were photos of her with Gabriel in picture frames strategically placed on the shelf, side by side, as if they were trying to narrate a love story that, to her, felt more like a convenient fiction. The lack of memories still left her feeling lost, but now she was certain that something was wrong. The first thing that caught her attention was a stack of books, carefully arranged on a side table. Art books, novels, biographies, topics that seemed vaguely familiar, but that didn't spark any specific memories. She ran her fingers over the covers, trying to feel some connection to those stories. It was as if she were searching for a spark of recognition, something that might lead her back to who she truly was. But the emptiness in her mind persisted. Then her eyes fell on a small leather notebook, tucked away in a corner of the table, half hidden under a pile of magazines. She picked it up curiously, feeling the aged texture in her hands, and opened the first page. The writing inside was in delicate, slanted script, but the words didn't seem to be hers. There were a few scribbled phrases, brief paragraphs of scattered thoughts, but all without any depth or significant content. It seemed more like an attempt to imitate a diary than a genuine personal record. "If this is my diary, why can't I remember anything I wrote?" she thought, feeling a chill run down her spine. Her distrust intensified. She flipped through the rest of the pages but found nothing beyond vague, emotionless phrases. It was as if every word had been written to play a role, without any real connection to her. She returned the notebook to the table and continued exploring the living room. Beside the bookshelf was a small wooden cabinet. Hesitantly, she opened one of the doors, revealing empty shelves and a small wooden box. She picked up the box, feeling a growing anxiety, as if this search were bringing her closer to a truth she might not want to face. Carefully, she opened it and found a few papers, notes, and a small bundle of letters. She held the bundle of letters between her fingers, unfolding the first one with a certain hesitation. The words were direct, brief, almost formal. She felt the weight of a cold emotion as she read. "To Gabriel, with respect and gratitude for our partnership." signed with an unfamiliar name. The handwriting was thin, elegant, but didn't feel like it belonged to someone close or intimate, much less to a fiancé. She moved on to the next letter, and amidst the formal phrases, something unexpected caught her attention, a mention of transfers and future procedures. The words weren't explicit but left a strange impression, as if something were hidden between the lines. Her hands trembled as she folded the letter back and returned it to the box. At the bottom of the box, she found a small photograph. It was an image of an imposing mansion surrounded by gardens, with elaborate architectural details. Something about the photo felt familiar, a touch of recognition that sparked a hint of nostalgia. Whoever this Clara was that he was trying to mold her into, she certainly knew that place. The photo, however, didn't look like a casual snapshot but rather a careful record, as if it had been taken for someone who didn't want to be forgotten. The front door opened, and she quickly closed the box, trying to mask her nervousness. Gabriel walked in carrying a few shopping bags, and smiled when he saw her. "I'm back," he said in that same reassuring tone. "How are you? Did you enjoy a bit of peace while I was out?" Clara forced a smile, trying to hide the tension pulsing through every cell of her body. The questions danced in her mind, increasingly insistent, but she knew that, for now, the best course of action was to stay calm and not let him sense her unease. "Yes, it was nice to rest a little," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Gabriel smiled and set the bags on the table, carefully taking out the items. As he organized everything, Clara watched him with an analytical gaze. His every movement seemed calculated, as if he were always aware that he was performing for someone, for her. The idea that Gabriel might be creating a story around her, fabricating memories to fill the emptiness in her mind, grew increasingly palpable. He interrupted his own movements and approached her, looking at her with a somewhat forced smile. "I have an idea. Maybe we could look at some old photos," he suggested, his tone optimistic, trying to build a bridge that, for her, already seemed broken before it had even been built. The suggestion made her shudder. The idea of seeing those old photos now felt almost like a joke. If all the memories he was trying to create were false, what would really remain in those images? "We could try later," she replied evasively, unsure of what more she might discover. There was an invisible urgency, a rush to help her recover her memories, but why was Gabriel so invested in this? And more importantly, how far was he willing to go to ensure she believed this story? Gabriel nodded, a bit disappointed, but didn't insist. He returned to arranging the bags and quickly changed the subject, talking about neighborhood news, the neighbors, the restaurant he wanted to take her to next week. Each sentence was a distraction, each comment an artifice to divert her from her own suspicions. When he finished organizing everything, he finally suggested that she rest for a bit. "You need to take care of yourself, you know that," he said with a smile that, to anyone else, would seem kind. But to her, there was no comfort left in those words. Gabriel seemed like a stranger increasingly determined to turn her into someone she wasn't sure she wanted to be. She nodded, retreating to the bedroom, where she lay down and closed her eyes, but her mind remained active, like a stormy sea. The image of that mansion returned to her mind, pulsing in her memories as something that might bring her back to who she really was. More and more, she felt that Gabriel, with his words and his memories, was trying to keep her away from a truth only she could discover. As she tried to organize her thoughts, she made a silent decision. She would continue to play his game, pretending to believe the stories and memories he was building. But at the same time, she would keep exploring, digging deeper. Something told her that her identity was much closer than he wanted her to believe. As the sunset painted the Velmer sky in shades of pink and gold, Gabriel suggested they go out for dinner. There was a calculated ease in his voice, as if he wanted to convey the idea of a calm, uncomplicated evening, yet Clara noticed the attentive gleam in his eyes, something that clashed with his casual tone. "I thought it might be nice to go out for a bit," he said, with a smile that tried to appear carefree. "You always liked this restaurant." She nodded, accepting the invitation. Part of her wanted to decline and retreat to process everything she had discovered in the apartment, but at the same time, She felt an urgent need to see how Gabriel would act in an environment where he might not have complete control. Her growing suspicion about him only intensified, and going out seemed like the perfect opportunity to observe his behavior more closely. When they arrived at the restaurant, Gabriel led her to a table by the window, where she could see the soft lights of Velmer streets. The setting was warm and welcoming, decorated in cozy tones, a choice that seemed carefully planned to make the place inviting and comfortable. Gabriel pulled her chair out gallantly, smiling as he sat across from her. "I know everything still seems confusing," he began, his tone reassuring. "But trust me, time will bring the memories back, and hopefully, you'll see that I only want what's best for you." He spoke with the same careful tone as always, but something about his words felt overly rehearsed, as if he were trying to keep her under control. Clara forced a smile, nodding as if she agreed, but inside, every sentence he spoke only made her more alert. While he chose the wine, she took the opportunity to look around. The nearby tables were occupied by couples and groups of friends who seemed absorbed in their own conversations and laughter, unaware of the invisible tension between her and Gabriel. She felt a pang of envy as she watched the spontaneity of the other patrons, as if they all owned their own stories, while she remained trapped in a narrative she still wasn't sure was hers. "Would you like your usual dish?" Gabriel asked, trying to sound natural. "After all, you've always loved the food here." Clara hesitated, uncomfortable with his insistence on reminding her of preferences that she didn't truly feel were hers. His constant repetition of phrases about what she liked or always did began to sound like a carefully orchestrated brainwashing. "I think I'd rather try something new," she replied without much thought, but she noticed the slight hardening in his expression. Gabriel looked surprised but quickly regained his composure, smiling with the same air of indulgence. "Of course, dear. Whatever you want," he said, with a smile that barely masked the tension. The waiter brought the wine, and they toasted, while Clara tried to gauge Gabriel with discreet glances. He watched her intently, as if searching for any sign that his words were having an effect. After a sip of wine, he changed the subject and began talking about the neighborhood, praising recent improvements and mentioning places that, according to him, were important to them. Clara, however, noticed that even as he described each place with precision, the familiarity simply didn't come. It was as if he were trying to plant memories in her mind, hoping she'd accept the story he wanted to construct. As the evening went on, Gabriel kept the conversation casual, but Clara sensed an invisible pressure in his words. He seemed to be waiting for her to confirm some detail, a specific memory, anything that would validate the narrative he was offering. Yet her mind remained blank, with no emotional connection to those descriptions. After dinner, Gabriel suggested they take a walk around the block. Clara felt a slight apprehension as she realized he was avoiding any place that might evoke a true memory. He kept her close, controlling their route and commenting in a way that guided her, as a conductor leads a melody. As they walked, they passed a store with a display full of antique watches, and she stopped to look at one that caught her eye. It was a small, yet imposing watch with intricate, handcrafted details, like a relic from a past era. Something about it deeply moved her, as if it were a link to something or someone lost in her memory. Gabriel stopped beside her, observing her intently. "Interesting, isn't it?" he commented with little genuine interest, merely following her gaze. "You've always liked antique pieces?" Clara ignored the comment but continued to gaze at the watch, as if trying to pull a memory slipping through her fingers. Gabriel's gaze became uncomfortable, his presence encircling her like a shadow. "We need to go," he said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder with a slight squeeze. "It's getting late and you need to rest." Clara felt the tension in his touch, something more forceful than a mere gesture of affection. Gabriel's silent control seemed to intensify, as if he were determined to prevent her from asking questions or taking any initiative of her own. Something was clearly wrong, and his behavior only confirmed it. Upon returning to the apartment, the atmosphere between them was heavy. Gabriel, however, tried to mask it with a calm smile, concealing the growing discomfort she felt. He guided her to the couch and suggested they watch a movie to relax, but Clara declined, saying she'd prefer to be alone. "Of course, whatever you want," he replied, trying to sound understanding, though she noticed the look of disapproval he attempted to hide. As soon as he withdrew to the bedroom, Clara remained alone in the living room, feeling an oppressive weight in her chest. The night out, instead of helping her relax, had only heightened her feelings of suspicion and disorientation. Every step taken beside Gabriel was a reaffirmation that he was hiding something, and each word he spoke with that air of certainty was a reminder that he might be trying to trap her in a life she wasn't sure she wanted. The image of the antique watch lingered in her mind, pulsing as a symbol of what she still needed to understand. She felt as though she were standing before a truth that could change everything, but she knew that to find answers, she'd have to fight against the lies Gabriel had constructed around her. He was a stranger she was supposed to trust, yet everything in his presence screamed for her to stay alert, to keep searching for what he seemed determined to conceal. That night, alone on the couch, Clara made the decision that she would no longer settle for Gabriel's stories. With each unsettling detail, with each sense of estrangement, she came closer to a truth that, deep down, she knew was essential to her survival. The night wore on, and the darkness of the apartment seemed to mirror the sense of emptiness and disorientation consuming Clara. Lying in bed, she tossed and turned, unable to find a position that would let her relax. Gabriel's words and gestures from their evening together continued to echo in her mind, like pieces of a puzzle she still couldn't piece together. She closed her eyes, trying to erase the images of dinner and the silent control he exerted over every moment. But instead of calming down, a new sensation swept over her, as if something in her mind was about to open up. She felt a light tingling, a strange pressure in her temples, and suddenly flashes of images began to appear in her mind. She was in a grand mansion, filled with light and enormous windows overlooking a vast, blooming garden. She could smell the flowers and feel the gentle breeze. In the memory, it was as if the scene stretched out before her in vivid detail, every aspect clear and distinct. The garden was surrounded by old, majestic trees, and the flowers gave off a sweet, intense fragrance that filled the air with a sense of tranquility. But the peace was short-lived. The image of the garden gave way to a large room where a couple watched her with warm smiles. There was something about them that evoked care and safety. But before she could understand who they were, the vision faded, as if her mind were trying to close itself off again. The emptiness returned, but the figures of that couple remained imprinted in her memory, like shadows dancing in the dark. She opened her eyes, breathing heavily, still feeling the presence of those figures in her mind. She sat up in bed, taking deep breaths, trying to process what she had just seen. Those faces, the surroundings, it all felt like a genuine memory, something that belonged to her, not the stories Gabriel was trying to tell. But who were these people? And why did the memory feel both comforting and unsettling? Deep down, she knew Gabriel shouldn't know about these flashes. Instinctively, she felt they were a threat to him and therefore, something she needed to keep to herself. She tried lying down again and closing her eyes, but the flashes continued to surface involuntarily. This time, she saw herself on a grand marble staircase, decorated with paintings and luxurious ornaments. Each step seemed heavy with history, each painting a fragment of a past she couldn't fully access. She felt once again like a stranger in her own life, like a visitor inside her mind. Struggling to find some peace, she got up and went to the living room. The apartment's silence was almost oppressive, and the dim moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a gentle glow over the room. She approached the window, gazing out at Velmer's distant lights. But her mind remained trapped in the memory fragments, as if those recollections were the key to discovering who she really was. Suddenly, she heard a faint noise behind her, and her body tensed. She turned and saw Gabriel standing in the bedroom doorway, watching her in silence. His expression held a mix of curiosity and poorly disguised concern. "Having trouble sleeping?" he asked softly, his voice gentle, but his gaze attentive, as if he were trying to decipher what was going through her mind. Clara forced a smile, trying to appear unconcerned. "Yes, it's hard to relax when you can't remember anything," she replied quietly. He approached, wearing that same rehearsed smile she was beginning to recognize as part of the mask he used to keep her under control. "I understand, my love. But this will pass," he said, moving even closer. "In time, things will make sense again." She wanted to believe him, but the memory fragments continued to surface, growing more vivid. The image of that mansion, the staircase, the couple who seemed so familiar, everything pointed to a life she knew existed, but one in which Gabriel played no part. Each detail of those memories contrasted with the simple, modest reality he was trying to impose on her. "Gabriel," she began hesitantly, her voice soft. "You've never told me about my family." For a brief instant, she noticed a glimmer of surprise in his eyes, something he quickly tried to mask. "Well, your family wasn't exactly close," he replied evasively. "You never spoke much about them." A chill ran down her spine at his response. Everything about him, from his tone to his choice of words, seemed carefully calculated to keep her away from the truth. "I remember the house. Large, with a huge garden," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Gabriel looked at her intently, and a shadow crossed his face. He stepped closer, holding her hands between his, a gesture that felt more like control than affection. "That must be a reflection, a mix of dreams and confusion," he said in a reassuring tone, but with a slight hint of impatience. "The mind plays tricks when we're confused." She nodded, pretending to accept his explanation. However, she felt a spark of certainty growing inside her. That house, that couple, they were not figments of her imagination. They were pieces of a life that Gabriel was determined to erase, but one she would no longer ignore. "Maybe I just need some time," she said in a calmer tone. "And you'll have all the time you need," Gabriel replied, gripping her hands a bit too firmly. "I'm here for that." Clara felt the pressure in his grip, a reminder that he was there to monitor her, to make sure she followed the narrative he imposed. But something within her had awakened that night. Those memory fragments were a sign that, no matter how hard he tried, Gabriel couldn't completely erase who she was. After a few moments of silence, he returned to the bedroom, casting one last look at her before disappearing down the hallway. She remained in the living room, her heart racing, and a growing determination within her. That night had marked a turning point. The memory flashes, vague as they were a connection to her true identity, and she knew she had to follow every clue, even if she had to hide it from Gabriel. She returned to the bedroom once she was sure he'd fallen asleep. Lying in bed, the images continued to haunt her. The mansion, the garden, the couple, there was an entire life waiting to be remembered, and she wouldn't rest until she reclaimed what was hers. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn. Her sleep had been interrupted by vague dreams, fragmented scenes of a mansion shrouded in mystery and faces that, though familiar, remained distant. Gabriel was still deeply asleep, so she decided to take advantage of the peaceful moment to reflect on the memory flashes and think about her next steps to learn more about herself. As she made coffee in the kitchen, a wave of anxiety washed over her chest. It was as if a voice inside her was urging her to act, to seek answers before it was too late. She knew that with each question she asked Gabriel, her situation became more complicated. But at the same time, the more he tried to divert her, the closer she felt to something important. After a quick coffee, she slipped on a coat and quietly left the apartment, taking advantage of the tranquility of Velmer streets in those early hours of the day. She walked without a clear destination, but she felt the need to escape that heavy, suffocating atmosphere Gabriel seemed to create around her. As she passed by the hospital, she hesitated. There was something about the place that drew her, a strange feeling that there was more there than just the spot where she'd woken up with no memories. Following her intuition, she entered and walked directly to the lobby, where an employee recognized her and greeted her with a friendly smile. "Good morning, Clara. Are you feeling better today?" the woman asked in a warm tone. Clara forced a smile and nodded, but she noticed that the employee seemed to know her more than just as a typical patient. Gathering her courage, she decided this was her chance to gather information. "Yes, but I still feel like some memories are blurry," she replied, choosing her words carefully. "Actually, I'd like to know a little more about what happened on the day I arrived here." The employee, a middle-aged woman named Marta, looked at her with empathy and nodded. "Of course, I can help. It was a man, Gabriel, who brought you in. He seemed very concerned and said you'd had an accident while you two were traveling," Marta explained. "He's the one who provided all the information for your medical record?" Marta's words were like a shock to Clara. Everything recorded about her identity and history came directly from Gabriel. This explained the lack of detail or familiarity in the version he shared. He had created the entire narrative from the start. "That's very kind of him," Clara murmured, keeping her tone neutral. "But, is there any other detail about me? Perhaps a contact, an address?" Marta looked at her thoughtfully, then hesitated, as if weighing whether she should say more. "Well, there was something unusual, but I wasn't sure if I should tell you," she said cautiously. Clara felt her heart racing. "Please, any detail would help." Marta glanced around as if making sure no one was listening, then leaned closer. "One of the nurses found a newspaper clipping in your coat pocket when you arrived. It was an old story about a missing heiress, and, well, the photo looked a bit like you." Clara felt a chill. That newspaper clipping had been with her on the day of the accident? And Gabriel, why had he never mentioned it? She felt that the missing piece was beginning to fall into place, however faintly. "And, do you still have that clipping?" she asked, trying to contain her anxiety. Marta paused, hesitant, then nodded. "Yes, the nurse thought it was strange and kept it. I'll see if I can find it." Clara waited as Marta disappeared down the hallway. Each second felt like an eternity, her mind spinning with new possibilities and questions. Who was this missing heiress? And why was Gabriel trying to keep her from that truth? After a few minutes, Marta returned with a yellowed piece of paper. It was an old newspaper article, dated about 2 years ago. The headline read, "Pereira family, millionaire heiress disappears under mysterious circumstances," and just below, a photo, a young woman who, at first glance, looked like her. Clara's hands trembled as she held the clipping. The words leaped out at her, and a storm of emotions took over. According to the article, the young heiress, Clara Pereira, had vanished suddenly, leaving behind a fortune and a series of unanswered questions. Clara felt that the name Clara Pereira sounded as familiar as her own face in the mirror. In that moment, she knew she was much closer to the truth about who she was. For a moment, she even forgot Marta's presence, who watched her with a curious expression. "Clara, are you okay?" Marta asked, concerned. She nodded, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "Yes, I'm fine. Thank you for showing me this. It was more important than you could imagine." She slipped the clipping into her pocket and left the hospital, her heart racing and her mind teeming with doubts and suspicions. The evidence she now carried with her changed everything. Clara Pereira. Was that her true name? And if so, what did Gabriel have to do with the disappearance of that millionaire heiress? As she walked back to the apartment, reality seemed to shift around her. Each step confirmed that the memories Gabriel tried to implant were false, a deliberate manipulation to keep her from the truth. She tried to organize her thoughts, imagining how she could confront him with this information without putting herself at risk. When she arrived at the apartment, Gabriel greeted her with a warm smile, but she no longer saw that gesture as innocent. He watched her carefully with the same guarded expression, like someone monitoring an experiment. "Did you go out for a walk?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes, I thought it'd be nice to get some fresh air," she replied, keeping her tone light but now noticing the control in each of her words. Gabriel showed no sign of suspicion and busied himself preparing tea, chatting about the weather and suggesting activities she could do to relax. But Clara barely listened. Her mind was focused on the newspaper clipping in her pocket, that piece of her identity that might change everything. In the days that followed, she avoided confronting him directly, yet continued her silent search for more memory fragments. Each time he mentioned a detail about the past she'd had, she forced herself to smile and nod, but inside, her resolve only grew stronger. While Gabriel spoke, she now knew she was playing a role in a fabricated story, a role he was trying to impose on her. And behind the silence, Clara felt certain she was on the right path to discovering the truth about who she really was. The days following the discovery of the newspaper clipping were filled with tension and caution for Clara. The certainty that she was more than the vulnerable, confused woman Gabriel was shaping her to be grew within her, making her increasingly eager to uncover more of her true story. But at the same time, she knew that any misstep could reveal to him what was really happening. She studied Gabriel in silence, observing his gestures, his expressions, even the tone of his voice, noticing details that had previously gone unnoticed. It seemed as if he was always on guard, always calculating each move. He was constantly in control, directing the narrative to keep her under his influence. Every smile, every touch, every phrase now felt like part of an act. One afternoon, while Gabriel was preparing dinner, she decided to subtly probe him. Seated at the table, she watched him handle the ingredients, focused, as if the moment were part of a carefree, ordinary life. Taking a breath, she asked a casual question that carried a deep tension beneath the surface. "Gabriel, do you think memories can return suddenly, without us even realizing it?" He paused for a moment before smiling and turning his attention back to the pan. "Of course, Clara. Sometimes all it takes is a detail, a sensation, for everything to start making sense. That's why I try to keep things as familiar as possible for you." He gave her a warm look, which anyone else might have found reassuring, but she could see a hidden unease there. She forced a smile, pretending to accept the explanation. But the truth was, her mind was now more alert than ever, as if his presence offered her no safety, but rather a constant warning of danger. She decided to continue probing, taking advantage of the topic she'd introduced. "And, have you ever tried to help me remember people from my family?" she asked, looking at him with genuine curiosity. He hesitated briefly, and it was enough for her to detect a slight tension in his expression. "Actually, you didn't like talking about your family," he replied in a more serious tone. "You always said it was better to focus on our life, on what we were building together." Clara nodded, maintaining a neutral expression, but inside, his response left her even more intrigued. If she was indeed Clara Pereira, heiress to a fortune, why would she have distanced herself from her own family? And why did Gabriel seem so certain that this specific detail was true? Dinner continued in uncomfortable silence, interrupted only by Gabriel's occasional comments about neighborhood news and activities he planned for the coming days. Clara responded mechanically, her mind circling around the questions he never seemed willing to answer. The temptation to confront him directly tugged at her, but she knew it carried risks she wasn't ready to face. Later, as they washed the dishes together, Clara noticed him watching her intently. His gaze was analytical, as if he were trying to decipher her every expression, searching for signs that he might be pushing her too far. She forced herself to appear unconcerned, but his watchfulness unsettled her, for it was the kind of observation no ordinary person would direct with such intensity. "You've been unusually quiet today," he remarked, his tone almost accusatory. She gave a slight smile and shrugged. "I'm still processing everything. It's strange, but I think I'm finally starting to feel at home." Her words seemed to reassure Gabriel, and he smiled, visibly satisfied. The control over the narrative seemed to give him a sense of power, and Clara realized that his ego was an important factor in his manipulation. He wanted her to believe, wanted her to accept the story he was constructing. That night, as Gabriel slept, Ana Clara lay beside him, but sleep eluded her. She thought about the newspaper clipping now hidden between the pages of a book in the cabinet. The idea of him discovering her secret kept her alert, but at the same time, there was something comforting about holding that small piece of truth. The name Clara Pereira pulsed in her mind, an echo growing stronger with each passing day. When she finally drifted off, she had a vivid dream. She was once again in the grand mansion she had seen in her fragmented memories. She walked down hallways lined with old paintings, and the sounds of voices and laughter came from somewhere far away, like a party happening in another room. She tried to approach, but each step toward the voices seemed to push them further away. She awoke with her heart racing, the sounds from the dream still echoing in her mind. She knew that mansion existed. She knew there was something within it that needed to be uncovered. But Gabriel was a barrier, a wall blocking her path, and she needed to find a way to bypass it without raising his suspicions. The next morning, over breakfast, she decided to try a different approach. "Gabriel, have you ever thought about us taking a trip together?" she suggested casually. "Maybe a change of scenery would help me remember more easily." He looked at her with curiosity, but quickly nodded, wearing a controlled smile. "Of course, we can go wherever you like. But I think it's still too soon. The doctors said you need a calm environment to recover." She agreed, hiding her disappointment. She knew he would never let her leave until he was sure she was fully under his narrative. But at the same time, she noticed that behind each refusal, there was a growing tension. Gabriel also seemed suspicious that she might be remembering more than she was admitting. After breakfast, he left to take care of some personal matters, and Ana Clara, now alone, took the opportunity to look at the clipping again. The image of the young woman in the newspaper looked more and more like the face she saw in the mirror. It was a piece of herself that Gabriel was trying to erase but that refused to disappear. She returned the clipping to the book, closing the cabinet, and made a silent promise. She would not give up on discovering the truth. When Gabriel returned, she greeted him with a smile, as if everything were normal. But inside, she knew that smile was more than just an expression of compliance. It was a mask, the same one he wore to manipulate her memories. She decided that, from that moment on, she would play the same game. She would pretend, perform, and deceive him just as he deceived her, until she could finally reclaim what was hers. Ana Clara knew she was waging a silent war against Gabriel, and each day she felt more ensnared by the oppressive control he held over her life. It was as if she were trapped in a carefully woven web, where each move seemed anticipated by him. But, despite this, something within her refused to give in. She felt herself drawing closer to the truth and knew that sooner or later, she would find a way out. On a cloudy afternoon, Ana Clara decided she needed to go out to clear her head. Gabriel accompanied her to the local market, and while he chatted with a vendor about trivial matters, she looked around, searching for an opportunity to slip away. That was when she noticed a woman behind the bakery counter, an older lady with a calm, kind demeanor, who gave her a quick but meaningful glance, as if seeing something no one else could. Ana Clara felt an irresistible urge to approach. She asked Gabriel to pick up a few items from the market and made her way toward the bakery. The woman, who seemed to have been expecting her, gave a slight smile and offered her a freshly baked roll. "You strike me as someone who appreciates the aroma of simple things," the woman said, holding out the bread. Ana Clara took the bread, but there was something about the woman's words that felt like a hidden whisper, making her feel an unexpected connection. "Sometimes, simple things hold great secrets," Ana Clara replied softly, as if testing the intuition she felt. The lady glanced around, making sure no one else was listening, and stepped closer. "My dear, I recognize that look. Something tells me you're searching for answers," she whispered. "I heard about your case, and maybe I can help." Ana Clara's eyes widened. It was the first time someone outside the circle Gabriel had built around her acknowledged that she might have another story, another identity. Something about the woman gave her a sense of safety and warmth. Do you know who I am?" she asked, her voice low, trying to contain the hope rising in her chest. The woman gave a slight nod and gestured for Clara to follow her to the back of the bakery. She led her down a narrow corridor to a room where sacks of flour and baking ingredients were stored. Once the door was closed, she looked at her seriously. "They call me Donna Lucia, and I know a lot of people here in Velmer," the woman began. "But you don't belong here, dear. I've heard stories, and something tells me you're much more than what Gabriel says." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. For the first time, she felt seen, felt that someone believed she might be more than the lost and vulnerable woman Gabriel had created. "I'm trying to figure out what he's hiding," she confessed, her voice wavering. "I found clues that maybe I'm someone important. But I don't know where to begin." Donna Lucia nodded, her gentle gaze becoming firmer. "I once saw you in a newspaper, years ago. If you're who I think, you're Clara Pereira, daughter of the Pereiras, a very influential family with significant business across the country. Your family was one of the most powerful in the region, but they disappeared one by one under strange circumstances." The revelation was like a shock for Clara, making her heartbeat quicken. The confirmation that she might indeed be Clara Pereira made everything feel more real and more frightening. If her family was as powerful as Donna Lucia said, and they had all disappeared, there might be something much more dangerous involved. "I found a newspaper clipping about a missing heiress, but Gabriel never mentioned it," she said, her voice barely audible. "He controls everything. He's creating a story where I have no one, where I only have him." Donna Lucia held her hand firmly, and Clara felt a comfort she hadn't felt in a long time. "Gabriel isn't who he says he is, dear. This man is hiding secrets, and it's clear to me that he wants something from you. He may be waiting for you to accept his story so that you never reclaim what is yours." Clara nodded, feeling stronger. Donna Lucia's words ignited a new determination in her, as if she had finally found an ally. "What should I do, Donna Lucia? He won't let me leave, won't let me seek help." Donna Lucia hesitated for a moment, then gave a gentle smile. "You have to be patient and clever, my dear. Keep pretending you believe him, but be ready. I have a contact who knows a lot about the Pereiras and can help, someone still seeking justice for that family. If you're brave enough, I can arrange for him to meet you." Clara felt a mix of relief and apprehension. This was her chance to escape the psychological prison Gabriel had created, but she also knew it would be dangerous. Still, she had no other choice. "Yes, please. I need to know who I really am," she replied, her voice trembling but resolute. Donna Lucia handed her a small slip of paper with a name and phone number. "Wait for the right moment to call, dear. This man knows the secrets of the Pereiras well and can help you discover what Gabriel is hiding." Clara slipped the paper into her pocket, feeling the weight of the information and the destiny now taking shape in her hands. She thanked Donna Lucia, who gave her one last look full of hope and kindness, then returned to the market where Gabriel waited for her. She knew that each step she took from that moment on was a risky gamble, but she felt stronger, more certain of who she was. When she returned to Gabriel's side, he looked at her with that carefully controlled smile, but now, for the first time, she was able to meet his gaze with a new determination that he did not understand. The path to reclaiming her life and identity was finally laid out before her. All she had to do was wait for the right moment. In the days following her meeting with Donna Lucia, Clara felt as if she'd regained a piece of herself. With the paper containing the contact's numbers safely hidden, she waited for the right moment to make the call. Each time Gabriel left to take care of important matters, as he always put it, Clara breathed a little easier. She used these moments to revisit the newspaper clipping and let her memory fragments surface without interference. The memories now emerged more vividly, as though simply knowing her real name had unlocked a hidden part of her mind. At night, her dreams of the Pereira mansion grew clearer. She saw herself walking through elegant hallways, adorned with furniture and art that seemed to have been selected with utmost care. She could smell the flowers by the windows and hear a distant melody played on a grand piano in a spacious living room. In one of these dreams, she saw a woman with dark hair and a serious expression watching her with a look of deep pride. Something about this woman felt profoundly familiar, a presence that exuded warmth and love. She knew deep down that this was her mother. The realization made her wake up in the middle of the night, her chest filled with an inexplicable longing and her eyes brimming with tears. Clara understood, more clearly than ever, that her life with Gabriel was a meticulously crafted lie meant to keep her away from this truth. With each dream, each memory fragment, she realized that she'd been taken from an important life, from a family shrouded in mystery, and perhaps even tragedy. Finally, on an afternoon when Gabriel left for one of his meetings, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She took out the paper Donna Lucia had given her and dialed the number with trembling hands. The phone rang several times before a low, steady voice answered on the other end. "Hello? Who is this?" the voice asked, with a tone that was both curious and formal. Clara took a deep breath before responding. "My name is Clara, or perhaps Clara Pereira. Donna Lucia said you might be able to help me find out who I really am." The line went silent for a few seconds, and she felt her heart pounding as she waited for a response. Finally, the voice on the other end spoke, this time with a gentler, more understanding tone. "My name is Augusto. I was the Pereira family's attorney for many years. I've always hoped someone would reach out." "So, you are Clara, or at least believe you are?" The confirmation brought an unexpected weight to her heart, but also a sense of comfort, as though she was finally connected to someone who understood the gravity of her situation. "I don't know exactly who I am, Mr. Augusto," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm trying to understand, but everything around me feels like a lie. Gabriel controls me, and every time I try to find answers, he manipulates me, as if he wants me to forget everything." On the other end, Augusto let out a long sigh, as though he was reliving a painful memory. "Gabriel," he said in a dark tone. "That man cannot be trusted, Clara. He has always had his eyes on the Pereira fortune. He manipulated you, took you away from your family. The last time I saw you, you were just a teenager, but you disappeared shortly after your parents' deaths." The words hit her like a blow. Gabriel had known her all along? And worse, had he been involved in her disappearance? Clara's mind spun with these revelations, and at the same time, an indignation began to grow within her. Every memory Gabriel had forced, every story he had fabricated now seemed like more than just manipulation. It was a plan to erase who she truly was. "Augusto, I need your help. I can't keep living under his control," she murmured, her voice heavy with emotion. "We must proceed with caution," he replied, his tone firm. "Though I have information about your family, we need to ensure your safety. We'll meet, but only when I'm certain you won't be at risk." Clara agreed, understanding the danger they faced. She knew that any wrong move could end in disaster. She put away the phone, feeling more confident than ever but aware that now she had to continue playing her role alongside Gabriel, waiting for the right moment to act. That evening, as Gabriel prepared dinner and tried to make conversation about the day, Clara maintained a controlled smile, pretending to accept what he was saying, all while internally crafting a strategy. She knew that, sooner or later, he would notice the subtle changes in her attitude, but she needed to buy time. Gabriel noticed that she seemed a bit more introspective than usual and made a casual comment while serving dinner. "You've been quieter these days. Is something bothering you?" he asked in his usual careful tone. Clara smiled faintly, feigning agreement. "I think I'm just processing everything. It's strange, but I feel like I'm finally starting to remember things, little details. It feels like I'm getting closer to who I am." Gabriel remained silent for a moment before nodding slowly. "And that's good, right? All I want is for you to feel at peace, to remember the things that truly matter." She forced a smile and nodded, but his words echoed like a reminder that her freedom was still far away. He continued to be watchful, testing her limits each day, waiting for her to finally give up on the truth and submit to the life he had created. Later, lying beside him, Clara replayed her conversation with Augusto in her mind. Every detail about the Pereiras, every word about Gabriel and his potential connection to her disappearance, felt like pieces of a puzzle that were finally beginning to fit together. What had once been a vague suspicion was now becoming a dark truth, but she wouldn't allow Gabriel to continue destroying her identity. As sleep finally enveloped her, she had one last vision. She was in the mansion again, but this time, she was not alone. She saw a familiar shadow beside her, a presence that sent chills down her spine. She tried to reach out to the figure, but as she turned, she saw Gabriel's face watching her, with that same controlled smile, as if he had found her in a place she didn't belong. She woke with a start, her heart racing. She knew this wasn't just a dream. Gabriel had always been there, lurking in the shadows, molding her to fit his narrative. But now, she knew the truth, and she wouldn't rest until she was free. After her conversation with Augusto, Clara knew that time was running out. The closer she got to the truth, the more dangerous the game with Gabriel became. She understood that, sooner or later, he would notice her shift in attitude. But now, armed with the confidence of her true name and a newfound resolve to escape, she felt ready to confront him, albeit cautiously. One evening, as silence filled the apartment, Clara waited until Gabriel seemed relaxed. He was sitting in the living room, reading a newspaper, while she stood by the window. Her reflection in the glass was a constant reminder of her journey, how lost and fragmented she had once been, but now it was the image of someone slowly reclaiming herself. Taking a deep breath, she decided to test his limits, knowing an unexpected reaction could confirm her suspicions. "Gabriel, I've been thinking about my family," she said, watching his reaction closely. He lowered the newspaper slowly, his expression shifting almost imperceptibly, his eyes now fixed on her with an unsettling intensity. "Family? I thought we'd agreed that was a part of the past you didn't want to remember," he replied in a gentle tone, but she noticed the rigidity in his face. Clara smiled slightly but pressed on. "I just find it strange that I have no one but you. Is my entire family really gone?" She looked at him with a questioning gaze, daring him to show any sign of nervousness. Gabriel kept his expression controlled, but his eyes darkened. "Clara, I've explained this to you before. You chose to distance yourself from everything. Some memories are best left behind," he replied, attempting to keep his tone reassuring, though she detected a shift in his voice. She took a step toward him, feeling increasingly confident. "It's strange, Gabriel, because I've been having visions of a mansion, a large, luxurious house where I used to live. And I can't imagine why I'd leave a life like that behind," she said, challenging him. For a brief moment, she saw his calm facade crack. Gabriel stood up, adjusting his jacket automatically, as if he needed to regain control of himself. He walked over to her with firm steps and stopped just inches away, imposing. "Those memories aren't real, Clara. They're a product of the confusion, of all the stress you've suffered since the accident. You need to trust me," he said, his voice lower now, laced with a subtle threat. She held his gaze without flinching, and an idea surfaced in her mind. She knew that if she wanted to uncover the truth, she would have to confront him more directly. "What if I don't want to forget anymore? What if I want to understand everything about the Pereira family, about what really happened to me?" she asked firmly, refusing to be intimidated. Gabriel's brow furrowed, and the calm mask he always wore began to slip. He gripped her shoulders, and his expression held a mix of anger and desperation. "You're wrong, Clara. This is your life now," he said, his voice controlled but with a hint of menace. "There's no one else. Just the two of us. We're all that's left for you." She felt his grip tighten on her shoulders but remained steadfast, determined not to back down. "I think I should be the one to decide that," she replied in a low, steady voice. Gabriel let out a heavy sigh, his face hardening. He seemed ready to say something more but restrained himself. Taking a deep breath to regain his composure, he finally released her. With a controlled smile, he returned to his seat, though his gaze was colder now, as if that conversation had shifted something irreversibly between them. "You need to understand that everything I do is for your own good, Ana Clara," he said, almost in a whisper. "Only I can take care of you. Without me, you're nothing." His words landed heavily on her. Every one of his statements sounded more like a sentence, a desperate attempt to make her accept his control. But she would not be intimidated. She felt stronger, and her resolve to escape had become a silent roar within her heart. That night, as he slept, Ana Clara sat on the couch, absorbing the impact of Gabriel's words. "Without me, you're nothing." He was determined to keep her trapped, erased, as though her true name and identity were mere details to be discarded. At dawn, she took the phone and called Augusto, whispering to avoid waking Gabriel. "Augusto, he knows I'm remembering. He'll try to stop anything I do. We need to meet soon." Augusto's voice on the other end was calm but firm. "I'll handle it, Clara. There's a safe place where you can stay until we settle everything, but we'll have to act quickly." She took a deep breath, emotions mixing with fear and hope. "I'm ready," she replied, with a determination she'd never felt before. After hanging up, she knew there was no turning back. Gabriel might believe he had control, might think he had her submissive, but she knew she was closer than ever to breaking free. Each memory, each fragment of her identity brought her closer to Clara Pereira, and she would not let Gabriel erase that. When he woke, she greeted him with a fake smile, the same one he had always used to control her. She was ready to play the same game until her freedom was finally won. Ana Clara knew that morning would be decisive. The call with Augusto the night before had ignited a flame of hope, illuminating her every move, even as Gabriel watched her with a suspicious, careful gaze. She decided to proceed calmly, maintaining a serene, indifferent expression while mentally organizing her escape plan. When Gabriel left that morning to take care of urgent matters, as he often did, Ana Clara felt the weight of her limited time. It was now or never. She grabbed a small backpack, placing the newspaper clipping, Augusto's number, and a few essential items inside. She left the apartment with careful steps, her heart racing. She'd waited for this moment since her first memories had resurfaced. Following Augusto's plan, she went to a busy square in the center of Velmer, where a driver awaited her in an unmarked car. As she climbed in, a wave of both relief and fear washed over her. She knew Gabriel would notice her absence soon enough, but the feeling of being free, even temporarily, was like a breath of fresh air in her stifled mind. The driver took her to a small, secluded hotel on the outskirts of town, where Augusto awaited her in a reserved room. As she entered and saw the tall man with graying hair and a firm expression, she felt for the first time that someone was truly on her side. He greeted her with a warm smile and a reassuring handshake. "So, we finally meet again, Clara," he said, his eyes shining with recognition. Hearing her real name spoken with such respect and affection brought tears to her eyes. It felt like she was returning to a home that had been stolen from her. "I don't know where to start," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "All I know is that Gabriel, he deceived me all this time." Augusto nodded, understanding the depth of suffering hidden behind her words. "Clara, you're the sole heir to a powerful family, and that position has brought enemies, greed, and tragedy. Gabriel has always had his eye on the Pereira fortune. When you disappeared, I knew something was wrong, but the circumstances were never clear. He took advantage of your vulnerability, and now you're here, ready to reclaim your life." Ana Clara listened to each word as though piecing together lost fragments of her history. She heard about the Pereira family's great fortune, the mansion that now felt so familiar, and the intrigue that had surrounded her family. But above all, she was beginning to understand why Gabriel had kept her captive in such a subtle way, hiding the truth and creating an identity that wasn't hers. "Augusto, what can I do now? He's dangerous, and I'm certain he'll pursue me to the ends of the earth," she said, her voice still apprehensive. The attorney took a deep breath before responding. "We need to act quickly, Clara. I've contacted a team of security personnel and investigators to ensure your protection and to recover everything that's yours. But you must stay safe. We won't return to Velmer until we're fully prepared. Today, you'll be taken to a secure location, and when the time is right, Gabriel will be exposed for who he really is." Clara felt a mix of relief and determination. The prospect of having protection and support to reclaim her life and identity was more than she could have imagined. She knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but finally being free of Gabriel's control, she felt ready to face any obstacle. Augusto escorted her to a car with tinted windows, where 2 security guards were waiting. As the car sped through the city streets, she watched the landscapes of Velmer flash by, like scenes from a nightmare from which she was finally waking. After a long journey, they arrived at a secure property where she could stay while awaiting the case's resolution. She felt safe, but the anxiety of confronting Gabriel face to face lingered. She knew the final confrontation was approaching and that, to fully regain her freedom, she would have to face him once again. In the days that followed, Augusto kept her updated on every step of the plan. He and his team prepared documents and gathered evidence, while Clara slowly recovered fragments of her memory. Each new memory made her stronger. Each detail of her childhood and her connection to the Pereiras was a step toward reclaiming who she truly was. One morning, Augusto called her for an important conversation. His face was serious, but his eyes held a calming reassurance. "Clara, we've gathered everything we needed. We have enough evidence to expose Gabriel and ensure your safety and your rightful inheritance of the Pereira estate. Are you ready to face this final battle?" She felt the weight of the question, but her answer was already imprinted in her heart. "Yes. It's time to take back my life." The day had arrived. After weeks of preparation and new revelations about her identity, Clara knew she was finally ready to confront Gabriel and end the cycle of lies and control. Augusto had arranged the meeting strategically. Gabriel would be presented with documents exposing his manipulations and proof that Clara was the legitimate heir of the Pereiras, the true Clara Pereira. They chose a formal, discreet office for the confrontation. Sitting beside Augusto, Clara waited, her heart racing but resolute. She felt the strength of her name, her story, granting her the courage needed for what was to come. She looked at the documents on the table, confirming that the Pereira fortune and all properties were hers. Now, all she had to do was face Gabriel and reclaim her life. A few minutes later, Gabriel entered, his expression showing a mix of mild surprise and discomfort upon seeing Clara and Augusto side by side. She noticed him trying to remain calm, but the tension was evident on his face. He sat down slowly, never taking his eyes off her, and finally, with a forced smile that once would have deceived her, he tried to act as though he were still in control. "Clara, what's going on here?" he asked, his tone a mix of disbelief and restrained anger. She held his gaze, unwavering. The same manipulative facade that had controlled her for so long now appeared as nothing more than a fragile image, ready to crumble. "Gabriel, I think it's time to end the lies," she replied, her tone firm and steady. "I know who I am and I know what you did. You took my life, my memories, and tried to trap me in a story that was never mine." He opened his mouth to protest, but Augusto interrupted, sliding one of the documents across the table toward him. "These are records proving that Clara is, in fact, Clara Pereira, heiress to the Pereira fortune and the sole owner of the family's properties and assets. You manipulated her to steal this inheritance and kept her from her own past." Gabriel remained silent, his face hardening. It was clear he was trying to process the situation and find a way out, but the weight of the truth paralyzed him. "You think you can just accuse me like this?" he said, his tone laced with feigned indignation. "Clara, you know I've always wanted what's best for you. Everything I did was to protect you." She felt a surge of fury rise within her. All the lies, all the manipulations. He was still trying to twist the situation. "Protect me?" she countered, her voice now filled with controlled anger. "You imprisoned me in a lie, Gabriel. You stopped me from remembering who I am and tried to turn me into someone with no past, no memory, no will of my own. But now it's over." He looked at her with restrained fury, his eyes burning with the loss of the control he had cherished. He saw that she was unwavering, and his expression turned to one of both disdain and frustration. "So, that's it? You recover some story and think you can just cast me aside?" he said bitterly. "You think it's that easy to walk out of my life as if nothing happened?" Augusto stepped in, placing a supportive hand on Ana Clara's arm. "Gabriel, what you did to the Pereira heiress has consequences. We've already informed the authorities, and Ana Clara's documentation has been restored. You no longer have control over anything that belongs to her." Gabriel stood up, looking furious and desperate. His eyes darkened as he moved closer to Ana Clara, as though making one last attempt to intimidate her. But she held her ground, meeting his gaze directly. "You can try as hard as you like, but I'm not going back to that false life you created for me," she said, with a firmness he could not break. He saw her strength, saw that he no longer held any power over her, and finally let out a heavy sigh, his face defeated. With one last look of contempt, he turned and left the room without another word, leaving Ana Clara with a sense of freedom she had never felt before. Once he had disappeared through the door, Augusto smiled, visibly relieved. "Finally, Clara, you've taken back what's yours." She smiled back, feeling the weight of the named Clara Pereira on her shoulders as a symbol of her victory. Now she was free, finally free to live as she chose, and she knew Gabriel would never control her life again. That evening, Ana Clara, or rather, Clara Pereira, made a public statement revealing her identity, reclaiming her name and her story for all to see. News of her return spread quickly, and people recognized her as the Pereira heiress, from a family that carried a legacy both important and mysterious. Finally, Clara was ready to start a new life. She knew there was still much to do to restore the Pereira fortune and rebuild the legacy Gabriel had tried to destroy, but now she was at peace. Amid all the challenges and the mysteries she still had to unravel, she possessed something no enemy could ever take from her again: her freedom, her identity, and control over her own life. It was a sunny day when Clara Pereira entered the family mansion for the first time after officially reclaiming her name and inheritance. The place looked exactly as it had in the memories that haunted her dreams, the massive windows letting in golden light, the luxurious, history-rich details adorning every corner. She walked down the main hallway, letting her fingers slide along the walls, feeling as if she were finally home. The sense of freedom and belonging ran deeper than she had imagined. Every part of the mansion seemed to have been waiting for her, preserving the memories and stories of the Pereira family, a past that Gabriel had so recently tried to erase. Now, however, the mansion was more than just a material inheritance. It was a symbol of her resilience and her fight for truth. Clara knew her journey was just beginning. Reintegrating into her family's legacy and restoring the Pereira family business would be a long and challenging process. Many former partners had distanced themselves after her disappearance, but she was determined to honor her family's legacy and create something that truly represented the spirit they had left behind. In the months that followed, Clara worked closely with Augusto, who offered his expertise and unwavering support. He had become a true friend and advisor, someone she could trust completely. Under his guidance, Clara actively engaged in the social projects her parents had once initiated in Velmer, ensuring that the Pereira name was again associated with a positive and lasting impact on the community. One of her first initiatives was to open the mansion's doors to create a community center offering education, skills training, and cultural events for local residents. Clara wanted to give back to the neighborhood, to show the same warmth that had welcomed her in her time of need, even if indirectly. Velmer was more than just a place. It was where she had found support and where she had ultimately awakened to her true identity. The center's opening brought a wave of people who welcomed her with warmth and admiration. Dona Lucia, The bakery owner who had helped Clara in her first moments of struggle was among the first to arrive. She embraced her like a mother, visibly moved by Clara's transformation. "I always knew you were special, my dear," Donna Lucia said with a proud smile. "This place will be a wonderful gift to Velmer." Clara felt her heart fill with gratitude. She realized that everyone she had met along her journey to freedom was now part of her story and her rebirth. She had learned so much from each obstacle, each fragmented memory, and each unexpected encounter. Now, she was at peace with herself and had a clear purpose to move forward and honor who she had always been. As news of her return spread, Clara began receiving invitations and messages from people who had once been friends or partners of her family. Gradually, she rebuilt her network of contacts and reopened businesses that had been closed after the Pereira family's disappearance. Her work was demanding, but each new project and contract marked a new chapter, a testament to the fact that she was finally the author of her own story. One quiet afternoon, as she sat in the mansion's garden reflecting on all she had endured, Clara felt a profound sense of serenity. The path she had chosen, to reclaim and continue her family's legacy, brought her genuine purpose. It wasn't just a material inheritance she had reclaimed, it was her right to be herself, to break free from Gabriel's lies and manipulations, and to begin anew with integrity. Her days were now filled with activities, meetings, and events. But in her free moments, Clara made a point of walking through the mansion's hallways, exploring every detail as though she were conversing with her parents, reclaiming pieces of their stories and memories, creating new memories for the next chapters of her life. At nightfall, Clara looked out from the mansion's windows, gazing at Velmer's glowing lights, a brightness that brought warmth and life to the city, now part of her legacy. The darkness that had once shrouded her mind and life had dissipated, leaving only the clarity of who she truly was. She knew there was much more to do, and she was ready for every challenge. And so, Clara Pereira became more than just an heiress. She became the guardian of a story of resilience, and her journey was far from over. Every step she took was a new achievement, a celebration of her freedom and her true identity. At last, Clara was at peace. If you love stories that touch the heart and surprise you with every chapter, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Here, we're dedicated to bringing you new content every day, pouring passion into each story we create. Every subscription makes a huge difference and helps us continue bringing more chapters from the city of Velmer. So, if you'd like to support us and keep these stories coming, hit that subscribe button and join this adventure. Thank you for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.